with the creation of the ideologies of communism, fascism, Nazism, uh, I always felt that communism I think originally supported, I suppose, by the deep state of its day, partly to bring Russia under control and punish them for the Civil War assistance. But I think the ideas, or at least the idealism of communism, started to resonate with everyone worldwide, and maybe even became a threat. So I think they ended up needing a counterforce that would be similar to that, but be more palatable. And and that's why I think Italy and then later on Germany kind of came into play. Um, Once again, this is a simplified explanation, but do you see um, any truth in that assessment, or and can you kind of go into that
Hmm.
time period?
Well, I think that the nuance that I try to walk a little bit is again that human beings are, we tend to be problem solvers, and we try to figure out how do you you're born into situations that you didn't control. You're sometimes provided an experience that didn't give you a full sense of reality, but you sometimes want to, like, if you're a good person, you will take whatever you can get and you'll try to do something with it. And there's definitely some poisonous pills, like, so embedded within like I've seen, how am I going to word this, because I could approach this in a few different directions. I've seen good people and bad people use capitalism, call themselves capitalists, and use the institution and the theories of capitalism to very different effects based on their intentions and ideas. Some good, some led towards the emancipation of people and the reduction of the power of empire. Others did the opposite. Same thing for like socialism, communism. Some people call themselves communist, but you'll find that they're not ideologically communist. Like, they don't believe that private property is a sin that should be abolished for human beings to have your utopia. Like, like they're more pragmatists. And you'll find that they tend to think for themselves, and they take what they like from Marx and they leave what they don't like. You get this with religious people too, right? They take, reasonable religious people will tend to take what is good and reasonable from their biblical or Quran or Torah, whatever text, and then the things that are irrational, they'll leave it, right? And there you can get really good ecumenical dialogue, peace building measures. A lot of good happens when you have the people who are just like, everything is literally true just because it's in my particular document. That's where you get the germs for war, right? They just don't think for themselves because they're letting their ideology think for them. So I think that with the case of Marx, um, what you tend to have is a decent critique of empire. So he's criticizing the hypocrisy of British exploitative economics pretty well.
Mhm.
And British economics is pretty bad. Like, just read Oliver Twist or A Tale of Two Cities. It's pretty bad. That's how it was. Extractive slave labor, just to make money. But he was ignoring the American system entirely in his analysis. He was, if anything, treating Lincoln and Hamilton and the entire American system as if they were just another branch, a sub-branch of British monetarist economy. So right there, that's a big fallacy, because it's two different universes. So a lot of people will be attracted to his critique, and then they'll be like, well, when it comes down to like his application of like the way it should be, I don't really like that. It's not going to work. So I'm going to do things my way. I just want to, like, let's say, end hunger. Let's focus on like how to end hunger, right? And we'll use like the state to plan things in as best as we can to try to end hunger. And we'll try to like clean up our backyard. Like we're just trying to like figure these basic human needs out. And that's generally, and this is where you get the fight between the Trotskyites and the groups around Stalin in the 20s. And this is where, like, for example, people wonder, like, well, why was it that Trotsky was kicked out of Russia and he was never allowed to go back in? Why was he kicked out in 1927? What was he doing? Well, his version was a more pro-fascist, like he had a more fascist reading of Marx. Like, so he saw communism as being a useful way to attract dumb people into supporting you, unions and other things, while giving the real power to supranational entities above the nation state, which is where things like the new economic policy of Russia, the Soviet Russia, came in 1920, was it 21? Which where Armand Hammer was brought in as like the George Soros character of Russia, right, of the 1920s. That was Armand Hammer.
Right.
And you have this mass privatization of everything. And the idea was, okay, we need to privatize, and so the power structures, the levers of consumption, production went into the hands of a supranational clique of elites tied to Wall Street in the city of London and the old Russian oligarchs who had still survived and actually arranged for the overthrow of the czars, because some of the oligarchs did that from within.
A lot of people don't know that Trotsky was, I think he was in New York at one stage. And you know, he was being chauffeured around, had a refrigerator, which was high tech technology at the time, and yeah, it was very strange considering that. And I think he was trying to get back with Trotsky. I think he was trying to get back into the Russia via Canada. Was it Canada?
Yes, he was, and Wilson.
And I think he was stopped in
Wilson,
Halifax, right? And
he got arrested for a month with his
yeah,
family, trying to get back, and Wilson jumped in and got him out. The
yeah,
president of the United States,
that's
who was
right.
behind, he was a puppet for the British, a major player behind the League of Nations, which was itself an attempt to create a one world government as a solution concept to the World War I, Balkan Wars, Bolshevik mess. But luckily it failed because the nationalists of various countries, especially within the US, after Wilson died, were too strong and they didn't let it happen, thank God. But yeah, Wilson kicked in, got Trotsky out of prison in Canada, because there was still, again, there was a nationalist movement in Canada that had gotten a good deal of influence. Originally, they came to power under this fellow named Wilfrid Laurier, who was ousted by a roundtable coup in 1911, but his faction came back to power in the 20s. All the way up until 58. Now that's a whole other thing. But read my Untold History of Canada books. If people are listening and they want to know about that story, Untold History of Canada. So yeah, Trotsky was like the bankroller. So he's the guy who was doing all the negotiations with the heavy hitters on Wall Street, as well as he met with Bertrand Russell when Bertrand Russell and H.G. Wells went to Moscow. They partied together. You had Milner, who was a major bankroller. I think Anthony Sutton even documents the writings of, I forget who, was an investigative reporter who lived through the Bolshevik Revolution and who had documented Milner's gift of $25 million, which is huge sums in those days, to the Bolsheviks. There's a lot of London and Wall Street money behind that. So all that to say, they wanted this Soros version of like a perestroika type of fake communism that would be based upon the control ultimately of private cartels and banks from above, with nominal, frontmen like Trotsky as the socialist savior of the people dictator who would just be overseeing the extraction of wealth of the people, kind of like what Yeltsin was assigned to do. But Trotsky was just, I think, more happy to do it. Yeltsin had to become an alcoholic to do it. And luckily there was enough at that time embedded within the Russian Soviet leadership that had a sense, kind of like Putin and Primakov. Like, this is what the Stalin group, they were not willing to oversee the destruction of Russia. They had access, they had identities tied to their deeper historical continuities that they didn't want to just like watch that be destroyed. So there's a fight. Hmm?
Well, yeah, well, that goes back into I suppose, the two Americas, the two Russias, where you had the world revolutionary Trotsky and socialist in one nation Stalin.
Yeah, Trotsky wanted global revolution, right? And that was the
Yeah.
whole thing. Like Stalin's like, whoa, let's, before we try to burn the world, let's just try to figure out how we can just solve the core problems here. We got starvation, poverty out of the wazoo. Let's just figure out if we can get rid of those things, and then maybe the world will want to like follow our lead. And Trotsky was like, no, let's just burn the world. Let's revolutionary, all the way. And you can see how that would be incompatible. And that's, in that sense, you could criticize Stalin for a variety of reasons, but that was the right orientation compared to the alternative of the Trotsky view of turn the world upside down on behalf of a ruling elite. And that's why also, people, there's been a lot of work to paint the image of Trotsky as if he was the victim of evil Stalin. And Stalin was like kind of like synonymous in many people's minds, including my own mind. For much of my life, I thought Stalin and Hitler were kind of like the same thing.
Mhm.
A lot of that is just when you start digging at original source material and you start looking at where do these narratives come from and what evidence are they using to back it up. It's a big tower of sand. Like Stalin has problems, but no way is he on that level at all. Like when you have like the Moscow trials, where there's the story that he made up he made everything up about this Trotskyite conspiracy to kill him and overthrow his government, right? And create an alliance with Hitler and the pro-fascist British and the Japanese. We're told all that was fake. It's like, no, actually, when you look at the evidence that's especially been declassified in the last 8 years, because a lot of this had 75 years classification, you couldn't even read it if you were in Russia. But
Mm.
now it's coming to the surface. You could read these things. People like Grover Furr is a great researcher who's got an endurance I don't have to go through source material of these transcripts. And it's like, no, there's definitely a very deep state penetration to kill Stalin and all the leadership and bring back Trotsky and align Russia with the Nazis and the
Mhm.
pro-fascist British as part of a New World Order agenda with the Japanese fascists. That was the agenda. That was the New World Order that almost happened. And
Mm.
Sutton is a great researcher for some of this stuff, but he misses this because Anthony Sutton as well. He's an ideologue libertarian. So he's looking at the world from the filter of a strict libertarian, which has certain assumptions, such as all examples of state power are all equally tyrannical and thus bad because the only good is personal liberty to do whatever you want. And so every time you have the utilization of state power is a reduction of people's right to do whatever they want to do. And thus that's bad. So you get that problem where in his mind, Roosevelt and Hitler are the same thing as Stalin and Lincoln. They're all equally tyrannical and bad.
Right.
That you miss a lot when you think that way.